So that was an example of how there's always stuff going on. So I was just explaining, or not, I wasn't explaining anything, I was just describing this sense we have that there's a lot of stuff that's going on. And one of the ways it shows up in my life is what just happened there. Because I really did, I was sitting in the office and I realized I hadn't gotten the microphone yet, and I thought, gonna have to remember to grab that on my way to the podium. And then the bell rang and I went, oh, that's kind of nice. Oh, Brian's kind of got one of his hands tucked under his, you know what I mean? I'm looking at stuff, and then I walk in and then I totally forgot about it, and I just started to talk and had never clipped this on. But that's kind of one of the things I'm talking about in my talk today, right? So stuff seems to show up, we put it in packages, and then we get caught up in the way that we're interpreting our reality, and we overlook what's actually taking place. And like I said, if you really start just thinking about life, there's always stuff that's going on, and then there's always stuff that we grab hold of and it distracts us, and there's more stuff that's going on. And what we tell you, right, I think this probably sounds familiar, when we realize that we're getting caught up in that habit of mind, we say, come back to this. Bring your attention back to this. I know I say that a lot, bring your attention back to this, but what are we talking about when we say that? Because I think it's very easy, knowing that habit of mind that we have, that we put things in packages, and then we kind of understand what the package means, and then we get sort of distracted by those packages, you know, like an Amazon truck dropping off a parcel for us, and we're so excited about what's going to be in there. Or it gets, for me, it's when I come home and I see there's an Amazon package on my front porch, and I don't really order that stuff very often, so I'm like, oh, I got a gift. That's what I think. And then you know what it is? It's the neighbors. Oh, it's going to be a gift for me, you know, and then it's just a letdown. But the fact that we're always parceling things does lead me to believe that when we hear, bring your attention back to this, that we've made something out of this. That this is something that's out there, and now we have to bring ourselves back to this. I just think it's real easy for that to be the way that we're constructing the instruction to bring your attention back here. Because who's bringing the attention to what? You know, so it just almost feels natural that that's what you're going to do, is think, oh, there's this, and I have to bring my attention to it. And if we pay attention to that, we can start to see we're already doing something with our experience. We're understanding our experience in some way that has separated you from experience. And it's something that we do. We're very good at it. When we sit in meditation, we have the opportunity to see that we're doing that. That's really it, just to see that we're doing that. And in seeing that we're doing that, realize that that's our experience right there at that moment, is separating yourself out. Constructing, and how, you know, the way we usually do that is we just create an object of mind. Something that's out there for us to look at, you know, and that's how we do it. So you can watch your mind grasping for objects, giving you this sense of, I'm here, and there's that thing there. Whew, thank goodness there's a thing there, because that means I'm here, right? Whatever that thing is. But what we're losing when we do that is the fact that we, whatever that is, our experience, and we're not separate from the experience. And that is hard for us to think about. It's hard for us to conceptualize, and that's good. It is hard to conceptualize. But we can use examples, and this is where traffic comes in, okay? Just know that this has some limited usage to it, but because we all drive, we know what this is like. You know, we know how traffic is the thing that we're stuck in when we're out driving. And I think it becomes clear, for example, for us, really becomes clear to us when maybe we left a little bit later than we intended to. I don't know what it is about me, but I know I have to leave at, say, 10 to some hour, 10 to 7 or whatever it is. And for some reason, my brain tells me, start getting ready at 10 to. And that's not really what my brain was telling me. It was telling me you got to leave at 10 to, not start getting ready. So there are moments where I find myself dashing out the door and getting into my car. And then you start noticing how badly everybody's driving. There are all these cars and they're driving so slow and come on. We have all these roundabouts in Richfield. We didn't used to have them, but now we have them. And there's a lot. I mean, there's 3 blocks in a row right by my house that are all roundabouts, right? And you get behind somebody and it feels like 2 miles away there's a car coming and they stop and they wait for the car. And you're going, this isn't how a roundabout works. Get in there, because I'm behind. I got to get someplace. I'm already I have half the amount of time left to get to my destination. Stop driving like this, right? And so we can see that. We need to get somewhere. And that's actually, these are the kinds of situations where we can start to see our own mind when there's urgency, when there's restlessness to the way that we're experiencing something. Now, when I start feeling like that, I go, I'm only noticing this, or I'm only, I'll say, representing in my mind that this is what's going on right now because of the situation that I'm in. And I can see that I need to have a villain to explain my restlessness, my sense that this isn't going right. What's interesting about traffic is what we're forgetting while we're doing that, while we're driving our car, is that we are traffic. Right? Traffic is the whole flow of all the stuff that's going on there. And you're not separate from that, you're part of that. So I think about, for example, if you're on a highway and somebody's going to cut you off. I have a friend who does the opposite of this, somebody who's tailgating him. This will probably sound familiar, but he puts on his brakes then, where I'm just like, you're just asking for trouble. Right? Puts on his brakes because somebody's too close behind him, and then whoop, then everybody's got to quickly react. And what he's not realizing is he's thinking that car behind me or the car that cuts you off, they're kind of separate from you, and then you do your whatever it is. Maybe you tailgate somebody who just cut you off. You're going to teach them a lesson. Whatever it is, and what you're not realizing is you're all part of that flow. And so now if the flow is going to have a little, you're part of that. And so you have the opportunity to respond to the in any way that you want. Just understand that whatever you choose to do is part of traffic. It's just part of the whole thing. And sometimes you can actually get a sense of that, of how everything that's swirling around in those roads is all working together when you, for reasons you cannot understand, on a busy day on the highway, everybody's slowing down to about 5 miles an hour. And then it goes back up to speed limit, and you have no idea why that happened. But what happened was, traffic happened. There may have been an accident or somebody who needed to slam on their brakes, and it's still working itself out through traffic. We don't really know what's going by. There we are, part of it. And you could go, this is a 55 mile an hour zone. We're only going 5 miles an hour. I'm going to go 55 miles. You could do that. And that's then part of traffic, whatever it is that's taking place. And so we make choices based on, so how we kind of interpret the situation, but it's how it's showing up to us, and then what we think is the appropriate thing for us to do at that moment. And in doing that, we're affecting traffic, right? Because we're part of it. So traffic is affecting our choices, and our choices that we make affect traffic itself. So there's this interaction. So that's what I mean by saying that you are traffic, or we are traffic, right? That's it. Here we are. There are these conditions, and they're showing up in such a way that it seems to be like this, and it's what I'm talking about when I say we return to this. Well, returning to this isn't to something outside of you. It's to just this, without any kinds of way of talking about it. You don't have to go, I'm not separate from this. It just return to this. That's it, just to this experience. There's a teaching in Buddhism, in Zen in particular, comes from what's known as the Huayan school. And Huayan is often referred to as the philosophy of Zen. And it has very interesting teachings. We offer courses from time to time in some of the Huayan teachings. They can be kind of challenging as you try to work with them rationally. They're interesting teachings though. And they have this one teaching that's called Indra's net. And of course, the problem with Indra's net is if you think about it too hard, again, it just doesn't seem to make any sense. But you can get the gist of what it's talking about just by the image that it's setting up. So the image is that there's this net that's infinite, right? That sort of, I'll just say it stretches out infinitely in all directions, right? That's this net. And at I don't know what to call these things, each point in the net, you know, where the net kind of comes together. Each point in the net, there's a jewel. And each one of those jewels is reflecting all of the other jewels. Each jewel is reflecting all of the other jewels. And that means that these jewels are infinitely, they're reflecting infinite number of jewels, which includes themselves. Because if they're reflecting all jewels are reflecting them as well, infinitely. You think of it as, I don't know if you've ever done this. When I was a kid, my parents used to take us to, it was like I don't even know what kind of store it would be like, but it was a clothing store, and it was cheap clothes. It wasn't secondhand clothes, but it was cheap clothes. And it was, to me, buying clothes was like one of the most boring things. And then mom would pick all the clothes out, and you'd just be like, I don't want to wear that. And, no, try this on. You have to go into the dressing room. But the dressing room to me was really kind of fun because of the mirrors. There'd be 2 mirrors on opposite sides of the dressing room, and you'd go, oh, and it would reflect as far as you could see, as long as your head wasn't getting in the way. Do you know what I mean? And that tells you something right there. Our heads can get in the way all the time, as seeing does. But those mirrors and what they're reflecting, infinity reflecting there, it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. I saw a fun Charles Addams strip. The TV show The Addams Family is based on a series of comic strips that Charles Addams, they weren't really strips, they were just comics that Charles Addams drew for the New Yorker. And I don't even know if this is an Addams Family strip, but he always liked doing comics that kind of had a macabre flavor to them. But he had a guy who was at a barber shop, and there were these mirrors reflecting, and we're looking at the one side where you just see mirror, 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 mirror of this guy, and in one of the reflections, the guy's a wolf. Just in one of them. So the mirrors are kind of fun. But like I'm saying, the experience, the reason that that's so interesting is you start to get a little taste of that infinity. But that infinity, you're reflecting that, and it's reflecting you. That's how Indra's net shows up, right? All beings are showing up as a jewel, showing up in that jewel. But whatever it is, whatever object we can climb onto, all beings showing up as that. And yet, that, whatever that is, and this is something else we can think of, is never the same from moment to moment. So this is something that's important. So as we think about coming back to this, and we think about this as being something that's outside of me, and if we think about all of this, what we're doing is we're not still registering that dance that is experience. So from moment to moment, no thing is the same. Now we can start to go, oh yeah, I understand. At an atomic level, oh, well, perhaps. But I'm not even talking about that. You don't have to go that far. Just look at experience. Experience itself is an expression of that. Right? If things weren't changing, if this was kind of the way that we sort of imagine that it is, there'd be no experience. Because we don't think of it in that way. We don't think, oh, I think nothing's changing. We always think that things are changing, but then there's this thing out there, and then there's me, and we're in this relationship with one another. But things are never the same from moment to moment. They're always influencing each other. Each thing influencing each other thing. All beings working together to show up as this. And guess what? You're all beings. You're not separate from that. So it's not like there's all beings and they're working on you. All beings are just showing up as this, and whatever you're doing is affecting all beings, right? So it's this mutual working together that is reality. All beings are not separate from us. All beings is life itself. I thought I would read to you a passage from Dogen, who was an important figure in Soto Zen. Most of you, I think, have encountered Dogen in one way or another. And this is a pretty well-known passage from one of his better-known writings. And I'm going to read a big part of this, but I'm just going to talk about a little part of it. I mean, I say a big part. I look at my page and it's, it's a paragraph. So for you guys, don't think this is going to go on for hours. It'll go on for like a minute or something. But when a fish swims through water, it finds no limit of water, no matter how far it swims. When a bird flies the sky, it finds no boundary of sky, however high it flies. Therefore, no fish or bird has ever left the water or the sky. When they need great space, they use great space. When their need is small, their use is small. In this way, each fish and bird exhausts all space and freely acts in each place. Yet, if a bird leaves the sky, it immediately perishes. If a fish leaves the water, it dies at once. We should understand that water is life, and that sky is life, that bird is life, and that fish is life. Life is fish, and life is bird. So I don't know if you're paying attention to this, but again, the way we would separate is, life is sky, life is water. We're thinking, okay, bird flying in the sky, fish swimming in the water. We've already separated this out, so now we're going, okay, sky is life, water is life. And then he goes on and he says, bird is life, and fish is life. And that maybe that we can wrap our head around, because that's probably how we normally think of life, as like a fishy swimming in the water. Or when you pull that fish out of the water once and you really see life fighting. I remember when I was a kid, I was told fish don't feel any pain. And then I'd go fishing and we'd pull the fish out of the water, and that thing would be writhing and flopping around, and sure looked like it was suffering to me. But yeah, that's so, we can think of bird and fish as life, because that's the way we understand life, but sky and water is life, because we can't have bird or fish without sky or water. And yet, what is the life of sky without bird? What is that? I don't know. And of course, I say without bird, but we could put a whole bunch of stuff in there without cloud floating by or whatever it is. What is that life? So Dogen goes on, he says, there. So I want to back up a little bit, talking about the birds and the fish and the water and the sky and this intimate relationship that they have with one another that is the expression of life. He says when they need great space, they use great space. When their need is small, their use is small. This is how life shows up. Again, we don't really think of it that way because we might think, oh, I'm so overwhelmed right now. Right? So we start to think about big or small. We're not really seeing that we just naturally do what needs to be done. That we take care of life, and life is us. Life is all beings showing up this way. So Dogen says there is enlightenment and the realization that our little lives are limitless in this way. That they're not just that little parceled thing that we think it is, that starts the moment we enter the stage. Right? Thinking of Shakespeare's image of we are all players and we enter and we perform and then we exit, right? So it's not just that little time that we have on the theater stage where we do our stuff, work our magic, right? It's limitless. It's all the things, to use that theater metaphor, that make that theater theater, right? I just saw a play. Just saw the Welkin, actually. Jed had seen this play recently. Very good production. But I mean, I know, I worked at this theater before. I know all the work that it takes to get this thing going, to appear the way that it appears. You know, when I was exiting, I looked backstage because I knew what I was going to see. I was once the assistant stage manager for a show. And I do say once, I was not very good at it. You know it's bad when an actor's coming back to you and they're in a state of panic and they're yelling at you. You know what I mean? But what had happened is when I was doing this, the set had fallen apart and I didn't know what I was supposed to do about it. But apparently I was supposed to get it out of the way so that the actors wouldn't hurt themselves. So this actor's like, what are you doing? You got to get out there and move that thing off the stage. And I was thinking, well, then I'd be on stage during the performance and that would be weird, but something had fallen down and needed to be removed. You know what I mean? So anyhow, I'm walking out the theater and I see that space where the stage manager hands the props to the actors or helps them go through a costume change or all of that. And you see the lighting, you know, and somebody designed that lighting and there's some pretty evocative lighting, I thought, that show. And that person studied lighting and used their experience that they had, lighting shows and dance. I could tell there was some dance in the lighting. Dance lighting is often lit a little bit differently than theater. You know? But I'm saying all this because, again, all of this, it's more than just this limitless, or this limited way that we have of understanding. And we can realize that. That is all coming together to show up as this. And here we are showing up. And then how we show up impacts, is that lighting cue right? Did you step in the right pool of light? Are you missing? Sometimes you'll see that where an actor is just too far back and you can't see their face at all. Suddenly that beautiful lighting design is not so beautiful, right? So he says there is enlightenment. And the realization that our little lives are limitless in this way, and that life is sky, life is water, life is bird, life is fish. If, however, a fish or bird wants to swim or fly only after thoroughly investigating water and sky, they would find neither a path nor a place to live. So again, think about what sky and water is. That's not separable from us, but what we do, probably what might have even brought us here, is a sense that first we have to understand sky and water. Maybe we were going along just fine, swimming or flying, whatever it is, however you want to describe your life, and then started to seem wrong. Suddenly you found yourself in, now I'm going to mix my metaphors here, you found yourself in bad traffic. You know what I mean? And then because you're in bad traffic, you were trying to figure out what on earth is going on. I'm not going to do this anymore until I figure this out. Why is it like this? I better find out what traffic is. I better find out what the sky is. I better examine every ounce of it. I was really amused on a Wednesday night. Pat Quinn, one of our practitioners here, he's a Doan from time to time, was just on the board. Anyhow, he talked about the fact, he said, I'm the kind of person that if there is a book about hammers, I will read that before I use a hammer. And when he said that, I was like, oh, I totally understand that. That's me too. I want to know it. Because we're putting together things. I mean, it's again, it's sort of an awkward comparison, but it's not in a way, because it is what we want to do with our life as well. I mean, I do remember one time when life was really hard for me, and I had no idea what to do. I mean, I had no idea. And I really did, half jokingly, but with a lot of pain behind it, said, why isn't there a user's manual for this? This is so hard. I don't know what to do right now, And even that desire for wanting, that's okay, wanting that user's manual. That's okay. That's part of the experience. And see yourself grasping for, knowing the futility of that. Knowing that even if there was, I know I've made this joke before, but even if there was a user's manual, think about how big it would have to be in order to be able to accommodate everything. And then you've got to find the one page that it's going to be on. Right? I just recently got a car, and I'm still figuring it out. And somebody had asked me, is there a CD player in your car? And I said, nope, no CD players. This is a little bit newer than that. And I was going through my driver's manual, or the owner's manual, and I was looking for something else, and then it had a section on the DVD player / CD. I don't know why you'd want to watch a DVD in your car, but it was DVD player / CD player, and I went, I have a CD player in my car? Where is it? Because, I thought I wouldn't know where that is, and it's in the glove compartment. That's the problem. It's kind of hidden away, so you have to. I even told my husband where it was, and he still had to where is it? But what I'm saying is, even if you had a user's manual, that you'd be able to find, and you know how indexes are too. So for a while, the car was doing things while I was parking that alarmed me. So I was trying to figure out what's going on, and I used the wrong word, and so I couldn't find it in the index. I finally found it in the index. But there you go. That would be, even if we had a user's manual, we'd be flipping through it trying to find the right page. Never be able to find it, right? Because, again, the understanding that we have there is that this is understandable, that there's something that's out there, and I'm here, and I can know it. Now, again, in our daily lives, stuff does work this way. Right? I am learning how to use this car. And don't be frightened, I can actually drive it right now. So you don't have to pull over to the side of the road if you see me driving by. It's just the nuances of it, like the fact that my mirrors actually fold. I didn't know that they did, because you can't push them. But if you go in your car and you point it to a certain thing, then they do it. Well, I've never had a car do that before, so it was kind of like, it was another question. Do your mirrors fold in your car? I don't think they do. I tried pushing on them the other day. And then I thought, well, I was wrong about the CD player. Maybe I'm wrong about the mirrors, and I was wrong about the mirrors. But anyhow, so that in our daily life, there is stuff like that we can look at and learn about. But when we start just thinking about life in general and what life is, we're not separate from life. Life is just this right now. And the way you can know it is to just know it. Right? And how do you do that? Well, here it is. We're going through the precepts right now. A number of people here are doing that. And the first thing in each of those gray precepts is the precepts are guidelines by which Buddhists live their daily life. And the beginning of teachings that go with each of those precepts is self-nature is clear and obvious. It's clear and obvious. Yep. Bird just flies through the sky. Fish just swims through the water. And we just mosey on through life until traffic is bad. Or actually we've interpreted it that way, right? And then we start to see things in all kinds of ways. It becomes an opportunity, actually, at those moments to really pay attention and see what's going on. Now, we can do this, again, our meditation practice is the opportunity to slow down and see things as they really are as well. But we were just reading a passage this morning in our practice period. And practice period is like an intensive period where people sit and do meditation retreats and do studies. And we were studying this morning. And in this particular chapter, the teacher pointed out that there are those moments in life when life kind of shakes us out of our usual way of seeing things. And usually they're traumatic moments. That's when we really have to look twice or 3 times or more. But she also said we can do this, I don't remember the word she put, but purposely. We can sit down in meditation and we can start to look at what's showing up here as well. So those are my comments on your traffic. I don't know if people have comments or questions, thoughts about what's going on in the world, in their lives, whatever. What's that?
You listen to the band Traffic? You know the band Traffic?
Oh, Traffic, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the band Traffic. Not too well, but they're good. Good band. Music is traffic. Live performance is traffic. But music is, if you're listening to live music, it's that way. It's not just the performer. Like they can have a good night. I saw probably I know this is debatable, so just know I'm speaking right now just as a nerd and not as a Dharma teacher, But in my opinion, and it's the opinion of many people, so I'm not trying to claim this as unique to me, but Sonny Rollins is simply one of the greatest musicians who's ever lived. And I had the privilege of hearing him perform twice. And the first time that I heard him, I still remember I had never, ever experienced anything like that. I mean, it was just amazing. He came out, I don't know if you ever heard Sonny Rollins, but he came out and he was just playing. The guy's a master improviser, and he'll play 20-minute solos. And they're a little different from some other solos you hear. You can hear him working out stuff when he's playing. It's just amazing, and he does it fast. It's the speed of thought coming out of that horn, But the reason it was so electric is that he offered his virtuosity to us, and we offered our ears, because that was some complex stuff, back to him. And there was this exchange, the traffic of live performance, that was the aliveness of that moment. You know, on one hand you go, wow, it's Sonny Rollins, but it was the whole room playing together. I saw Sonny Rollins again, and it certainly wasn't a bad concert, but compared to that first one, it just didn't have the same crackle to it, you know. Partly because Sonny was a lot older, and I don't think he could quite sustain himself as long. But also the room was different. It was just a different performance, a different life of that moment. So yeah, I think music is a great example, actually. Thanks.
Danny Ferreira has a comment or a question.
And who's that?
Danny.
Danny, go ahead. Or Denny? Go ahead, Denny.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great talk. Thank you. The you are traffic, your talk. It like what I keep thinking of are the two truths, you know, is part of this practice to see both and not let the relative traffic, if you will. I'm not saying it right, but basically to come back to this, um, just see, try not to label everything. Is that part of the practice to be awake, you know, just to stop making this, that, and just to see, you know, you're in traffic, you're part of it. You're everything's constant change and you're part of that change. That do you I guess my question is, with someone with more experience like yourself, Steve, do you just try not to get too lost in your thoughts? Just is your without making it all about you, just being part of the flow. I don't, you know, I always find myself overthinking it, you
Uh-huh.
know, which isn't bad, I know, to think, obviously. We all do that in our everyday life. We need to. But is that is that the way I go about this practice? Is I just want to sit and be in the direct experience. Like I did ER nursing for 13, 14 years, and you don't have time to, you know, to get lost in your thought. Hopefully, you're just try to be in the moment.
Yeah.
That kind of, I guess my question is I don't want to have an agenda. I just want to practice this to be here. But you can label here too. I don't know. I'm
Right.
going off on a tangent, but I kept thinking of the two truths. Uh,
Yeah. Well, there
I
was a
guess
lot in
more of a comment
your
than
response, Denny. Yeah. So yeah, there was a lot in your response, and a lot of it was very useful. Thank you. Yeah. So we're talking the two truths, but I do want to kind of get to, you know, here. You said, you know, we could make something out of here. That's what the beginning of my talk was. Just thinking that when we talk about returning to this, that's sort of our default, is we just start coming up with constructs about what this is. And all we really want to see is we're doing that, you know. So it's not, we were talking about not non-thinking this morning. And Matt Graham gave a nice talk at the practice period, and in it, he reminded us of Dogen's teaching of think not thinking. How do you think not thinking? Non-thinking? Oh, what is that? Well, exactly. You know, and the teacher whose book we're reading, Catherine Thanis, she had a teaching in there about no choices, no choices or preferences. So she was asking her students to look at a moment in their life where maybe there was some kind of conflict or crisis, and try not to act out of choice in there, right? And I pointed out that no choice is the same as no thinking or not thinking, right? Not choice. It's not the way we want to put it as choice or not choice, but it's really non-choice. It's thinking or not thinking, it's non-thinking, right? So we live in a world where we have to do things, and we'll have to, go to the left or go to the right or pick up this instrument or pick up that instrument, all of this stuff. But we, as you're pointing out, Denny, we don't necessarily have to get hung up on that. In fact, if we get hung up on it, we usually get in the way. That's the image of me as a child looking in the mirrors and trying to see all those reflections. I said, unless my head gets in the way, right? Because that's what happens, is our heads do get in the way. And I know I've seen this with, I've talked about this before, but like high performance sports, and one of the things I think about is like downhill skiing, just how fast those skiers are going. They can't be doing the usual thinking. They are thinking to some degree, but it's not that kind of thinking where our intellect is getting in the way. Right? It's more immediate and more intimate than that. So I'm assuming, working in an ER, that's what you're talking about, right? You kind of had to know what you're doing. It's not like we're going to de-brain ourselves, right, and just be in the moment. Just being in the moment includes all that we have to know with whatever it is that we're taking care of. And we may not know. I know Cindy Cuccio, one of our students here, talks about the fact that we find ourselves in life in those things where we go, I'm not the person to do this. I shouldn't be doing this. And here you are. And she talks about needing to, she was working with somebody who had a tracheectomy, and she had to insert a tube or something in their throat. And she's like, I'm not the person to do this. I can't do this, right? And we do find ourselves in those spots, but we know what we know, and if we have to act there, we have to act there. Do you know what I mean? Without getting in the way. I do it all the time, and it's partly just from a lifelong habit of anxiety. So panicking is kind of a, it's a go-to thing for me to panic. I'm much better about it than I used to be, but holy cow, it was just something else. I'd have to rehearse every moment of my life. It was almost like theater, because I'd have to rehearse it ahead of time. It'd be like, all right, I want to know if the store carries this toothpaste that I use, right? So, first I'd open the phone book up and I have to call this number. All right, this number right here that I gotta call. And then I'm gonna tell them, I'm gonna ask them, do I need to talk to somebody in the farm? No, maybe I don't need to do that. Maybe I can just tell them I have a question about toothpaste, or you know what I mean? And so I'm going through all of this, and then I finally figure out what I need to ask for when I call up, and then it's, now what do I say? Oh, I'm gonna have to say, do you carry Tom of Maine toothpaste there? And and anyhow, whenever I was working up to, it almost always just got in the way. Like I'd say all this stuff, and you could hear the person on the other end going, what? Just in the silence, there'd just be this silence. And I go, I'm sorry, what can I help you with, It was usually just a simple thing. So yeah, that's an extreme version of that thinking brain that can get in the way. I mean, we have to think, right? Here we are, we're in this world. We have to make choices, we have to do things, but are we choosing, are we non-choosing and are choosing? Can we see how it is we make our choices? And we often do that by preferences. Can we realize we're doing that? And why are we doing the things we do? So yeah, I appreciate all that you were pointing out there, Denny. So yeah, when you say, is it to just sort of be in the flow? Well, it's just to live this, whatever it is. And it could be the flow is pretty turbulent, but to try not to fight that is hard, to not try to, when you say go with the flow, I remember, we think about those turbulent waters, to kind of, can we sort of move along with that turbulence? I'm not the person to do this, and I know I have to do this right now. My first kayak trip that I ever did was a real long time ago, before those were kind of common. And I remember I was a young man, so I was probably 21 years old or something like that. And we had two different levels of, I don't know what what you want to call it, 2 different levels of life-threateningness that we could do. 1, which was like, well, you know, a child could do. There's almost no threat at all. And 5. And we went, 5. We're going to do 5. And then I realized why it was 5. Because we got to this one point where it's kind of white watery, but you realize that part of that included something that really resembled small waterfall. You know, it wasn't really a waterfall, but it fell like 3-4 feet. And none of us had ever been in kayaks in our lives before, you know. And one of the guys really panicked, but he went after me, so I'll tell you what I did. I just went, and I took my oar out and I just went, I just hope the water carries me. And it pulled me right in the right place. You know, I'm sure I was lucky. The guy behind me had been panicking the whole time he was seeing this, you know, as we all were to some degree. And he flipped over and then was gone for a while. And we were pretty scared, you know. And then when he finally came up, he was sputtering, of course. We had helmets. They had you wear helmets. His helmet was missing. So we had to go finding that. And then he wouldn't ride in his kayak after that. And we were in the middle of nowhere. Like, come on, man, you got to get back in a kayak. It's not going to be that bad ever again. He's like, I don't care, I'm not, you know. So that's just that if you struggle, that's going to be a struggle. So even when he struggled, now it's the next thing. And if it's going to be a struggle, then that's what it's going to be. Does that make sense? Like, if it's a struggle, it's going to be a struggle. And it was a struggle for him from that moment on, you know. So yeah, it was a really long-winded answer, Denny, but you had a lot of really great questions and a lot of great points, so thank you for sharing. All right, thanks.